When Israel annexed East Jerusalem in 1967, it began evicting Palestinian families, and the evictions have continued to this day. The United Nations Human Rights Office has warned the actions could amount to war crimes. One of the most extensive expulsions has been in the Batan al-Hawa neighborhood of Silwan, where dozens of families are currently being driven out of their homes. As DW correspondent Tania Kraemer reports, Jewish settler families are waiting to move in, fully backed by the Israeli state and courts.
Each time Kayed al-Rajabi comes up here to his terrace, he knows it could be the last time. He's been served with an eviction order for his home in Batan al-Hawa, East Jerusalem, near the Old City. Now he says more than 30 members of his extended family will have nowhere to live.
All of us were born in this house. My father got married in this house. I can't imagine leaving the house where I was born, played, grew up, and laughed. All my memories are in this house. We're afraid they'll come every minute, knock on the door, throw us out, and toss us into the street.
Batan al-Hawa is a Palestinian neighborhood in Israeli annexed East Jerusalem. Israeli settlers have taken over houses here one by one. They move in as soon as a Palestinian family is evicted. More than 80 families are facing the prospect of losing their homes. Daniel Luria from the settler group Ateret Kohanim says they want to return a Jewish presence here. Some houses were sold, he says. Their legal claim is based on land owned here by a Yemeni trust in the late 19th century. They were driven out in the 1930s. Decades later, Israeli courts have all ruled against the Palestinian families.
They're not being driven out. They are illegal squatters living in an old trust. And this Yemenite trust basically applied to the courts, and the courts correctly ruled that they were illegal squatters. Nothing to do with Ateret Kohanim, nothing to do, we're not involved with the committee or the court cases. We are involved in helping the trust rejuvenate their Jewish life.
The area in Silwan has become a hotspot for settler activities. It is close to what for Jewish people is the Temple Mount and for Muslims the Haram al-Sharif. Israeli human rights advocate Sarit Michaeli has followed the case for years. She says Israeli law works in the settlers' favor.
The bottom line is that since the occupation of 1967, the occupation and annexation of East Jerusalem, Israeli Jews who claim they lost property in the 48 war of Jerusalem, in Jerusalem can reclaim it, can ask for it, and the government gives it to them. It doesn't matter that Palestinians, like the residents of this neighborhood, have lived in their homes totally legally. Some of them bought their homes and even got a mortgage.
Kayed al-Rajabi hasn't found another place to live. Affordable housing is rare in annexed East Jerusalem. Losing a home is a disaster.
We'll end up on the streets. We have no other place. This is our house, and here we have everything. Outside, we have nothing.
He has no more options left to appeal. The case has been ruled upon by the Supreme Court against him. Now he can only wait to lose his home.
Now let's bring in Amy Cohen. She's with the Israeli NGO called Ir Amin that advocates for the rights of Palestinians. Amy, can you tell us a bit more about this eviction process? What methods are being used?
Thank you so much for having me. Essentially, what we're seeing here is the exploitation of an already discriminatory laws that are, it's important to note here, they're domestic Israeli laws that have been applied after the occupation and annexation of East Jerusalem that affords one group of population, i.e. Jewish Israelis, the ability to reclaim properties that allegedly belonged to them before 1948 in East Jerusalem, while at the same time depriving Palestinians of the very same land restitution rights for the thousands of dunams of land that they lost in the same war, in the 1948 war, in what became Israel in West Jerusalem. And what we have in the situation in Batan al-Hawa is that in the late 1800s, there was an old Jewish trust by the name of the Benvenisti Trust that established homes for impoverished Yemenite Jews and inhabit them until the 1930s. What has happened, though, is that that trust since the 1930s and the individuals that live there, they were since left or evacuated during the Arab riots in the 1930s. And ever since then, the 1930s up into the early 2000s, this trust became completely defunct and dissolved. And then what you have is a situation where you have a very well-funded and very powerful settler organization by the name of Ateret Kohanim, who then did immense research and ultimately got themselves appointed to this trust, and then through the now legal platform is then been able to initiate all of these legal proceedings based on this very discriminatory 1970 law that I had mentioned in the beginning. And I think one of the things that's important to note here is that through this cooptation of the trust, which Ateret Kohanim has absolutely no relation to the original trustees of this trust. They have no relation to the previous tenants or occupants of this area in the late 1800s. Yet now, because of the fact that they were appointed by the government and then also approved by the district court in the early 2000s, they now have this legal platform to completely transform the neighborhood, evict Palestinian families that have bought and purchased these properties and have lived there for now generations, some of them themselves Palestinian refugees from 48, and now have that legal ability vis-a-vis the Israeli laws and the Israeli system to completely take over the neighborhood. And we're talking about 700 Palestinians that are now under threat
where does this
of
legal
really what could
situation
amount to
that you
forced
just
expulsion.
described there, where does this legal situation leave the Palestinian families then? Do they have any other avenues?
Essentially, no, there are no other legal avenues, because right now what we've had is since October 7th, there's been this surge of evictions that have taken place because of the fact that the Supreme Court has categorically denied them the right to appeal. So it has ended all legal recourse for them. And so after that legal recourse is completely ended, it's basically a fait accompli. They're just basically waiting on borrowed time unless there is any sort of government intervention. And we all know that the current Israeli government, there is no political will to come in and intervene. And I think it's important to underscore here that if we were speaking about, 700 Jewish Israelis that for whatever reason were under threat of eviction, simply maybe because of a real estate developer that wanted to come in and take over the space, the municipality, Jerusalem municipality, that claims to be over all of United Jerusalem, which is East and West Jerusalem, or even the Israeli government would come in and intervene to try to come to some sort of equitable and sustainable solution to allow the families to remain in their homes, right? And with a roof over the top of their heads, rather than kicking them out onto the street and allowing other people to take over their homes that have no relation to the area whatsoever, but beyond that of it being just completely illegal under international law.
Now, very briefly, we're running out of time here, but what does all this mean for the future of East Jerusalem and the coexistence of Palestinians and Israelis? Briefly, if you can.
So listen, I think this area is important to note that it's in the heart of historical Jerusalem. It is just meters away from Al-Aqsa or the Temple Mount. And so therefore it's prime real estate. And if we're talking about a future political solution where there's a political settlement that recognizes both Israeli Jews and Palestinians, their rights to Jerusalem, and ultimately the ability to establish a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem, then this has major political ramifications on the ability for it to actually to transpire in the future. But when we're talking about the actual humanitarian and human rights ramifications right now, we're talking about hundreds of individuals that are right now facing the threat of losing their homes that they have lived in now for over 60 to 70 years. And many of them were displaced prior to that and now stand to be expelled again. And so this is a mass injustice, and it's really a violation of international law, which needs to be held accountable.
Running out of time, we're coming
Yes.
towards the end of the show. I'm sorry for that. Thank you very much there, Amy Cole.
Thank you.